It is 7 o'clock. This is Wednesday, December 1st. This is the special meeting and committee of the whole meeting for District 96. Kathy, can you call the roll?
Mr. Barsadi?
Present.
Ms. Gunn?
Here.
Ms. Kleiber?
Here.
Mr. Marhol?
Here.
Mr. Muirhead? Mr. Muirhead?
Nobody's looking at me, so.
Ms. Murphy?
Here.
Mr. Hunt?
Here.
Okay, quorum is present.
All right. At this time, is there any public comment?
It's on.
Any public comment?
There is not.
Okay. Are there any proposed changes to the agenda? All right. Then that takes us right into committee reports. First item is Old Business / Facilities Committee. So let's see. Is there a motion that the board authorizes the architect to provide professional services for the project identified herein, which professional services shall be subject to all terms and conditions of the Master Agreement B-101, unless specifically provided in the memorandum, in this memorandum of understanding as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right. The first one listed is the Blythe Park Multipurpose Room. Is there any discussion on this?
Actually, just as an intro, these two memos are the memorandums of understanding, are the reason that we made this a special meeting so that we could vote on these. The first one is obviously the Blythe Park work, and at the beginning of that process would be a visioning and concept work to determine the exact needs of a potential auditorium renovation.
Has anything changed from the last meeting when we saw these? They're the same?
They've added the step approach,
Okay.
which kind of lays out a theoretical process that they get to develop their conceptual design. And then we did, just as a reminder, we did have a circuit breaker, as it were. So there's an element of cost for the visioning and programming, and then there is the auditorium repurposing project, which is so we can stop that work at any time, depending on our assessment of what they present. There were also a couple other Blythe Park items in there that you can see. The mechanical evaluation, which is just good due diligence. If we're going to do any work out in that building, then we know that the mechanicals have occasionally had issues, and we would want to make sure if there's any improvements that any additional work, plus once you start working on the changing that space, you will have to do some additional mechanical work no matter what. But no, I don't believe there's any changes.
Yeah, it doesn't appear.
Just to note the schedule as well, that this is a good schedule that gives time to develop the schematics and the estimates and the design, and it's not a rushed process, which also means there would not be construction work in 2022 should we choose to go forward.
Okay. Any other questions?
Nope.
So I know we had an expansion there fairly recently. Is this building on that work, or is that any way interrelated to that?
Sorry, say that again, Dave.
I know that they added a classroom onto Blythe recently. I'm wondering if there's anything this builds on, or
No, there's nothing that would affect that work.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember this, the additional classroom brought us to almost a two-section school.
Mm-hmm.
And this would while a two-section school is still possible and doable with certain scheduling sacrifices is probably the best way to term it, this would make it, would add things like the common room. And then it does make it so that you don't have to make those art on a cart or music on a cart schedule sacrifices. And then that's part of the visioning as well, as to see exactly what opportunities are we creating.
I think that we have yet to do more visioning work, but the idea is exactly as Joel said, is a large group space, because if we, as we move into two sections and as we consider full-day kindergarten also, you would potentially take the art room, potentially take the lunchroom, which is really just a regular sized classroom right now for Blythe, which also isn't big enough as we start having more of the two sections of every grade level eating lunch in different combinations. That the auditorium renovation would potentially become an art room. It's already in the music classroom, and then it'd be a large group space, a place to eat lunch or for large group projects. Really very similar to the work we just finished at Hollywood.
Just people are going to need to talk into the microphone so that Les can hear, because that's where he's picking up the sounds from that speaker. So just he texted you to say
All right. Wes, if you can hear me, give me a thumbs up.
You're a little bit better, not perfect. I'm heavily focused on hearing anything else. I can tell people talking, but I can't hear any words.
Okay.
Does that sound coming through there?
Not very much.
When you speak, it's perfectly clear, so I'm not sure what you're doing differently.
Is it coming through that microphone over there? Is that the public comment microphone, or?
I think we should be fine now.
Okay, we're good? All right.
Better?
That's a lot better.
There we go.
Okay. Good to hear, good to hear. All right, let's see, so any further questions? Are we ready to vote on this MOU?
Yes.
All right, Kathy, can you call the roll?
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Marhold?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Ms. Gunn?
Aye.
Ms. Kleiber?
Aye.
Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, second one is the MOU for Central Hauser Playground and Site Work. Is there a motion that the board authorize the architect to provide professional services for the new playground at Central Elementary and Hauser Junior High School as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion on this one?
Hi, the only thing I wanted to mention is I appreciated the earth versus natural surface discussion in January that'll be upcoming. I understand, sometimes we can't control what will happen with drainage, whatever, but I appreciate the discussion on the calendar for January.
This builds on the work that we did with
Lakota group.
Lakota,
and
thank you, I couldn't think of their
Yeah.
name, Lakota and Goal. So, and then also takes into account the idea that there is some work in the parking lot that is required to fix some basically aging infrastructure issues. So we're trying to make sure that we dovetail those two things together and do, again, appropriate due diligence in any improvements, that we're not burying or hiding, not deliberately hiding, but burying or inadvertently covering up something that needs work in the future or the near future.
Oh, I did have a question. You left money in there in case a traffic study needs to be done for the village, saying that it's possible we could need another traffic study even though we just did one. Does anyone have any information about whether we've talked to the village ahead of time for that, or is this just hypothetical in case?
I think because we've done, there's been a couple different traffic studies over, I think, we did one with Gawalt, essentially, and then there has been one done by the village, there's been done one by the district, so we have kind of a nice history of traffic studies. I think it just seems like if we start to speak of a different configuration in our back area and somehow maybe cars would flow out differently onto the street, I think we just want to be prepared that some new request could come up as we think about what
Like a
options we
contingency?
have.
It's, as Martha notes, it's a contingency.
Okay.
I think that just personally, I would question any demand for that since I don't believe any proposed design was changing where the driveways were, so, and our building use is not changing, but we know that additional requirements do appear from the regulating side of things.
Yeah, it's such a tight space, and that's where we even put a different driveway with the house on one side and the parish.
Right.
Thank you, that helps.
And I would say the other example here at Ames, when we did, the traffic engineer also just helped with reconfigure or rethink the pickup and drop off. So it wasn't really any reconfiguration of traffic, but she said, I think you can stack cars differently. I think, so she had some suggestions, and I have a feeling there would be that informal consultation that may turn into something more formal. So I think that's why that contingency's there. And again, just sort of guessing at, because we've talked about this project for a while, right? So having some of that insight.
Okay, thanks. That's what I figured.
Is there any reason we're going with DLA as opposed to going back to Lakota Group?
So Lakota's they're landscape architects. They did some nice, I think, focus groups, some concepts. I think as we started to look at the totality of the project, a lot of it being the infrastructure work, and Joel, as an engineer and as a board member, jump in here and as our facilities committee chair. It seems to make sense to work with our partner architect that kind of knows the comprehensive picture of our entire facility, particularly maybe the infrastructure work that we knew needed to get done.
Well, that's absolutely true. And the DLA has WT Engineering as their civil engineer, and we know that WT was a subconsultant to DLA on essentially the front of Central, so they're familiar with it. They also did the sewer study in the parking lot. Lakota is more of a, as Martha notes, a landscaping and planning company, so they really don't do hard infrastructure designs. That generally gets turned over to someone else.
Any other questions? No. Wes, you still hearing us?
Maybe about 25% of what's going on.
We'll get better at this.
I'm not sure
Did that
how
sound
much
good,
closer
Wes?
I can get.
Let's see, we'll move this
I don't know,
closer.
Don, I can hear you perfectly. I'm really struggling to hear anybody else.
Huh.
It's not picking up that much.
Anytime you want to talk, go by Dawn.
Yes. Well, Wes, any questions in regards to the Central Hauser MOU?
No, from previous conversations and what I've read in this, I think I'm good. I picked up on some of what you guys were talking about here, but I didn't have any additional questions on it.
Okay. All right, are we ready to vote?
Yep.
All right, Kathy, can you call the roll?
Mr. Marhold?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead?
Aye.
Ms. Gunn?
Aye.
Ms. Kleiber?
Aye.
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
And Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Motion passes.
There's some very enthusiastic ayes. All right. So anything else from the Facilities Committee, Joel, or should we move on to Finance?
No, we'll be holding a facilities meeting probably beginning of January. I know that Martha sent out an email suggesting some potential timelines, but we have not gotten back to her very well about that.
Well, and I think that there are nice timelines established here that will come back to the board at the January board meeting with a conversation about turf, and then we would come back to March board meeting with feedback from the Blythe visioning process. So I think that spells out a nice timeline. Again, we're not rushing into these projects. Just, we have to decide if we're going to do these. These are just that next step in
Right.
exploration.
Okay. All right, well, then we will move on to the Finance Committee. Next up is Finance then. Dave?
So, Wes, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear
All right.
you pretty well now.
So, I know there's been a lot of discussion surrounding kindergarten. So, what Jim Fenton has done, he's gone through and taken a look at what the cost for kindergarten. So, I want to just sort of preface this before we have a discussion, that this isn't whether or not we should do kindergarten, it's just the financial implications of if we did do kindergarten. And so, he looked at the cost, which I know is in the board book, about what it would cost to start full-day kindergarten across all 4 schools. And then also he put in the board book what we've been putting away in reserves for the last 5 years, since 2016. And so, as you can see, if you just look at the cost of what the additional operating costs would be, is still far less than what we've been putting aside in the reserves. So we've been putting aside to give so everyone, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at it. Last year was an anomaly because of COVID. We didn't do as much as we would normally have done. But we've put in well over $2 million for the last 5 years. So we could easily have absorbed the cost on this to implement that.
To that point, though, there's also the graph that Jim has done that shows where, over a longer time period going forward rather than backwards, that the difference between revenue and expenditures gets much tighter. I don't remember where those 2 lines cross.
It's 10 years out.
It's 10 years out. I thought it was 10 years, but I didn't want to misquote myself.
Right. But I guess the thing is, from a financial perspective, though, we haven't gone to referendum. We have not essentially raised taxes in several years. We're eventually going to get to that point, but I don't think kindergarten, whether or not the financial considerations or consequences of doing kindergarten should be weighed in our decision whether or not, because we can't absorb it.
Something to just a quick interject. I know you mentioned we haven't raised taxes. That's definitely a fair statement. We have not raised taxes other than by general CPI. I would think the experience of most of the community fairly recently has been their taxes have been going up in relation to, I think, what some of the retail establishments paying less and the residential paying more as a result.
Yeah, I want to push back on we haven't raised taxes.
Okay.
We've raised them by inflation rate, which I fully support, but a referendum means over and above inflation. So,
Right, which
and
we
I'm
haven't
not,
done.
I think your commentary about Jim's analysis, the looking back is true. But I don't want to get to the point where we're saying we didn't raise taxes.
And I probably missed.
No, and that's,
So-
I'm not,
and so-
more collaborative.
But I guess the thing is, what I'm trying to say is that, yes, we're going to increase operating costs so that the intersection is going to happen sooner than later. But it's not going to happen that much sooner. And we also have to keep in mind, too, we paid off our debt this last year. So essentially, if we keep the same trajectory, we're going to be putting in over $1 million in addition to this, so into our reserves. And so if everything goes according to plan, we'll be putting in over $3 million next year.
Does that include projections for new construction that we haven't yet put in the long-term financial graph?
It does not include the construction we have.
It does not include the construction. That's my one concern, is to make sure we have a full picture. I'm not saying, obviously, we need to look at everything, but I would like to see a complete picture before we make statements like.
It includes over $1 million of maintenance every year, so what we have, we can keep up really well.
Right, and Jim, I don't know how easier, but we budget $1 million for maintenance, as you just said, and then at least past projects we paid for out of fund balance, not out of our operational budget. So I think what we're looking at is the surplus of our operational budget in terms of overall services to children, personnel salaries, et cetera. The facilities work has come from a different source, at least up till now.
Right, we keep putting this into the fund balance, and then if we approve a project, we moved it out of here. That's why it hasn't just continuously grown by $2 million every year, because we decide to spend it on construction. And with some of the smaller projects coming up, we should be able to continue to do that if the numbers I originally seen on Central Hauser campus, that might be the one that makes it a lot tighter.
Yeah, I guess that's a lot up in the air in regards to that project in particular. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that project, a lot of what would happen with that project would be needed for us to do full day kindergarten, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
The Central Hauser project?
yes.
With the,
No, the Central Hauser project is really an exterior project.
right, but like
It's
the
playground
drainage
space
and,
and
They're
improved
putting in rooms. for
parking and
kindergarten.
pedestrian, yeah. The Blythe project does have an impact on full-day kindergarten.
Right.
Over time.
All right. It should also be noted too, that, I know I've talked with Martha, that we can put in full-day kindergarten in our current footprint. I mean, there might be some modifications, minor modifications that we need to make, but we don't need to put in a whole new, like, addition or another room onto a school to accomplish this. So if you look, there is, like, you'll see the first year, if we did it, assuming 2023 was the first year we implemented it, there is like initial startup costs, like buying additional supplies and what have you, and then the cost will drop, but there is a small startup cost accounting for a lot of that.
And Dave, that's a good point, is that we don't need additional relatively high-cost infrastructure to implement such a program.
It really comes down to staffing and besides kindergarten staff, we can use specialist people for lots of different things. They could be crossover for other purposes. I think my main issue that I'd like to see, just to be how we consider our staff needs long-term in general, about how we pay them, how that affects our fund, because they are our most expensive piece. And so that's just one thing I'm asking. And we've been doing a good job, I think, keeping an eye on it, but it's hard to tell 5 years from now where that graph will look. And so that's one thing that would help me make these decisions.
so we'll get our audit presentation in January, so we'll know what that last number is.
Right.
And then I'll take that and do projections for 10 years.
Great.
I wonder, Jim, and then to Sherry's point earlier, is there a way to update this with, I'm not sure that we have any kind of ballpark numbers for we just approved the MOUs, we don't, but I'm wondering at some point, if that can be updated and combined in some kind of a double hypothetical in that we're talking about construction projects that haven't been approved yet, along with full-day kindergarten that hasn't been approved yet.
A couple of versions.
If we do this,
Yeah.
if we don't. Yeah, that's a good point.
All right.
So any other questions or regarding this?
No, I mean, my only question is the financial projections, they do encompass everything, so it includes, and I think I've already talked about this, but I want to make sure, not only kindergarten teachers, but also the necessary specials and paraprofessionals and additional.
Right.
So that, this 400 and some odd over the next few years is all encompassing of everything that would need to happen for a full day, like, lunch supervision, everything moving forward.
And the number on the specials there, that if you chose not to do full-day kindergarten, doesn't mean that number goes away, because there's other reasons that might.
Right,
a certain
yeah.
percentage of that.
Yeah, right, we're looking at our specials teachers, because of Blythe becoming a true two-section school. The other thing that we have talked about is with more flexibility with our specials teachers and when children are art, music, and PE, it actually gives us time for grade level teachers to be able to meet together in a collaborative way, which is kind of very much a instructional practice. Teachers need that time. We go about creating that time for teachers after school. They find that time at lunch. They find that time on their own. But the idea of giving them some time within the school day is something that we value as a practice. So again, full day kindergarten, Blythe through section, there's just a couple things coming together. So that number that Jim has put here is, whether we call it worst case scenario or just most comprehensive look at
Right.
how specials teachers could be used.
Jim, for your table, it starts at a staff classification of BA in a early and, can't think of the right word here, Martha. New hire, that's what I'm, sorry, I couldn't think of that word, I apologize. You start off with a new hire, and I assume it's escalating based on the fact that that new hire is gaining a step every year,
Right.
plus their benefits.
Yes. So I kind of assume we're entry-level teachers, so if we hired someone that had 3 years' experience, we have to offset somewhere else.
Still go up a little, but no, this is a reasonable approach to the estimate.
Would these, remind me, would these full hires or new hires be just considered full FTE then, each of them? You wouldn't have the partials like we sometimes do?
Right, they'd all be full-time.
They'd all be, that's what I remember, I thought we had talked about.
We need 9 sections of kindergarten.
Right.
9 full-day sections.
Yeah, in a way, I like part of that because hiring those, I was talking about this with Linda and Angela and Martha at the Education Committee Planning meeting, that hiring these partial FTEs, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to find the right person, and sometimes I think you'll get better longevity if you have a full FTE. So that's, I guess, one bonus for that. But
And I'm really sure I answered the question about kindergarten teachers. You're talking about special teachers, but
I was talking about the
yeah,
special,
right.
of course, the kindergarten teachers, I would hope would have, that.
This is inclusive as well as the potential one section, I assume it would just be one section of half-day that would remain.
So the model that we're looking at is like what some districts refer to as a core plus more, is that if you wanted half-day kindergarten, you would go to the full-day program and leave at the half-day mark. It's just that we would design the schedule and the structure and the curriculum implementation in such a way that if you're only staying for half a day, you would be guaranteed sort of enough of what is considered the requirements of kindergarten. What we hear anecdotally is that districts are required to offer the half-day program, but that many, to most, perhaps to all, families end up opting for the full-day program. Maybe not in that first year, right, Angela? Yeah.
Well, it's good to have some numbers to it. We've been talking about it, so it's good to actually see the numbers.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, it adds context, and I appreciate the memo on operating surplus. It's just another layer of context for the conversation.
Might also point out too, just I think thinking about the other construction projects we have coming up or other just capital improvement costs that we have coming up is good to take into consideration for that like 10-year whatever plan, but there are other ways to fund those projects other than just like, writing a straight up cash check for those as well, where, it's, I don't even know if it would be allowed to take out debt for your operating budget, but like that, if it is, that seems really silly to do, but when you're doing capital projects, there's other funding mechanisms that we can use to spread that cost out over a longer term, so that would help with our longer term budgeting as well. So different outlets that, we don't really talk about debt very much. It's come up, maybe briefly a couple different times in the last year or so that we talked about it, but I think that's just one thing to keep in mind too, is other financing options for some of those capital improvements.
No, and Wes, I appreciate you bringing that up, because that is something that I do think we need to, as a board, to discuss, and especially with the construction project. I mean, debt is primarily used for long-term capital type projects. I mean, school districts don't just write checks we just did a $19 million construction project. I can't name one school district that just wrote a check for that. Okay. But what we did, so it's something that we should consider, or at least at the very least explore going forward, because that is what the purpose of debt for. It's not used for operations, but it is used for long-term projects.
Yeah, I'm totally willing to learn about it. Just be aware you will be paying more, obviously. The taxpayers will be paying more for what they're getting, so we'll have to consider what that entails. But yeah, I'm happy to talk about it.
Well, we'd also, excuse me, depending on timing, I guess interest rates remain pretty low right now. But I guess from what I hear anyway, that they seem to be creeping up on the horizon, or at least there's fear that they might be jumping up at some point.
Well, like I said,
next
we're not having a debt discussion now. We're not.
Yeah, sure.
We're not going out for debt, but it's something that if we're looking at like a $8 million, and that number I just pulled out of the air, but like an $8 million project for Central Hauser, do we want to write a check for $8 million? knowing that we might need to go to referendum sooner than later? Or do we want to maybe consider debt as an option to fund it over 10, 15 years at hopefully a favorable interest rate? But using that sort of segue, when we start talking about the central housing, once we start getting better costs, I'd like us to have that discussion surrounding possibly going out for debt for that, especially based on our projections.
And there's two ways to do it where you are raising taxes, so people are
Right.
paying down the debt, or like they did 10 years ago, and just borrowing it and paying it back out operating.
Yeah.
So two ways for finance to over a long period.
All right.
And just so you know, I mean, our goal has been to keep the conversation, the work going on at the kindergarten action team, coming to the committee of the whole table, which we've been doing. We knew that the financial piece is a piece we really hadn't looked at. You know, David, exactly as you said, this isn't a recommendation, it's a information and some analysis that we've been doing within the district. Wanted to share that. And then our goal is going to be to bring you at February COW, which is actually our next COW meeting, committee of the whole meeting, because we won't have one in January. We would bring a more full analysis, the feedback from the kindergarten action team, along with sort of the additional financial analysis. And I think we could prepare some scenarios that sort of look at the full set of projections with going back to that 10-year chart. And if we were to do construction and full-day kindergarten, and we can look at it maybe multiple different ways for you all to sort of have that big picture view of it.
Mm-hmm.
But all of a sudden, it feels like that timeline's going to be here really soon.
I know, yeah. The year goes by fast, doesn't it?
All right, well, I guess if we're maybe including all those hypotheticals, perhaps that's a third hypothetical to include, is what would things look like on an annual basis of yearly debt service?
Okay, well, I know we could get similar to what we did 10 years ago, so basically get $10 million and pay back 1.1 over 10 years. So the 0.1 was interest every year. So if you have it in the bank, you don't need to do that, but.
Sure. All right. Any other questions? Anything else from the Finance Committee?
No, that's it.
All right. Thanks, David. Next is the Personnel Committee.
You want to take this one? Results from overall results from the.
Oh, you're the hard one to hear.
I can kick it off with. I know we contracted with Eklund.
Hey, Wes, could you maybe talk a little closer to the microphone?
Is there any way to
Sorry.
amplify him there?
Or yeah, no.
We can't hear you now.
Yeah.
We can hear you, sort of.
Just get right up on your computer.
Right in front of you.
You're like this.
I think he's saying he was going to pass it over to Martha.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's what he was saying.
asking if he could pass it over to you.
Sure.
Because he's remote.
So I think as Wesley was sharing, we, as you all know, we used we worked with Eklund Consulting. Nate Eklund was the one that did our Institute Day keynote presentation on sort of an idea of, schools being great places to work as well as great places for students to learn. As part of that process, we conducted a survey of all of our teaching staff and paraprofessional staff. That's something that we did at the beginning of the year, we'll do at the end of the year, but we're also going to do a couple mini surveys along the way. I've explained the process in that overview. Wanted to share just broad themes, again, sort of in a process and why we did that and what our findings were from the initial survey. I can just share from the summary. I know the board has it in front of them, but in general, really looking at our building leadership teams as the core of helping us really with so much of the problem solving in terms of how we continue to work together and improve. I think schools overall really feel that the systems are very supportive. Teachers like each other, like working with each other, feel well supported by their peers in the school setting. Strong sense of each school really having their own staff culture and a place where staff feel very much like they belong, and certainly children belong too. School teams indicated they have strong family support from parents in the school community. I think it's another very great hallmark of our District 96 community. They feel that they have adequate resources to teach and to address student needs. In terms of areas of growth and improvement, it would be just overall improvement of communication and problem solving, understanding rationale for key decision making district-wide. Teachers do express concern about their overall workload. They would like to be more involved in the planning and outcomes for professional development. We've already created more committee structures, and our strategic plan really has a lot of those big ideas embedded in it. And overall, teachers described a strong sense of purpose and hopefulness in their profession, which is good news. That's a time, as we know, we're hearing that teachers are feeling perhaps frustrated, demoralized because of the impact of the pandemic, and we probably see some of that. There's probably some pandemic overlay on our survey data, but overall, I think teachers feel that they would recommend to a colleague that this is a great place to work, and that they would, help others value the idea of teaching as a great profession. Any questions?
No questions, but I'm definitely pleased to see this, and pleased to see that there are areas of strengths and areas for growth. I know Sherry mentioned earlier, like teachers and staff are our greatest resource. So it's really good to see that we're investing in making sure that they love working here and they love working with our students. So I think this is great.
Well, I'm just curious historically, like what has been the way in which you gather like the school-wide satisfaction survey? Did this just come out of the Eklund presentation this year? Is this something that you all have done yearly with teachers?
So
and have you seen a change, again, given the pandemic?
Right, so we're required to do the 5 Essentials survey, which is really a climate and culture survey. I think it's probably fair to say that I don't know that there are parents or staff in the district that think that it's a extremely meaningful tool in terms of the feedback we get. Some of it is just the overall participation rate isn't as high as we want. That survey was normed on a K-8 population, elementary schools with kind of their more pre-K here at Ames, pre-K5 or K5 identity. Just over time, and I don't think it's just in District 96, I don't know that teachers put a lot of stock in that data. We talked a lot about that at strategic plan. Well, if that's not what you like, then what do you like, right? Because improving climate and culture is a really important part of our work. So I would say it was this, we don't have comparative data, so this isn't the second time, or this is the first time we did this. There are other tools out there, but I would say, and this is my 6th school year here, the only thing we've been able to really rely on is 5 Essentials. We do survey staff about the impact of their professional development, what would they like to see differently, how do they rate just different sessions that they do attend. So we work hard to gather feedback, but this is perhaps a more formalized way of doing it than we've done before.
And I know there's upcoming pulse checks, but do we anticipate continuing to offer this going forward?
I mean, the view would really be that this is a multi-year process to look at that. And, again, not only does Eklund Consulting look to do the surveying, they really look to add that coaching and check-in process. So, for example, I was just at the Central School Building Leadership Team one morning this week, and Todd Battaglia, who's the partner to Nate Eklund in this Eklund Consulting Group, actually joined the Building Leadership Team meeting. And it was just great to hear him. He knows what the data is saying, and he was able to really frame a lot of the conversation around the problem solving and areas of improvement that the team was talking about. So that's the kind of service that it comes along with the survey, or really it's the service that we're purchasing, and the survey is an indicator of how well that's going.
It's probably a function of this being the first year. I mean, it talks about data, but I'm assuming in future years we might see benchmarks, or we might see how strong some of these sentiments or indicators are.
Yeah, right. So this is really baseline data because it's first time. We will look at it again, and it's essentially the same survey, to my understanding, in May. So we'd have sort of a beginning of year to end of year, but then we'd have, again, looking at next year, doing it again. And it's a short survey. I think it took our staff, Angela, 10 minutes to take it. So it's not a onerous, cumbersome survey. The company itself has done a lot of work on sort of what are those key nuggets that you really want to ask teachers and paraprofessionals about the areas that I describe in the themes that are presented there. Organization, wellness, support from colleagues, collaboration, that kind of thing.
So,
Does Eklund have any like industry benchmarks that we can compare ourselves against to, like general educational type survey data that we could say, other than just here's how we did year over year, how we compared to industry or geography or something like that?
Yeah, Wes is asking if there's other just benchmark data. So I think what they would share with us, and we don't have specific data points, but we ask that a lot. Like, what are you hearing from other schools? And they said also schools that they work with vary from sort of rural Alaska to big city to small suburban, which is where we would fit in. I think a general theme absolutely is teacher workload, teacher participation in making decisions about their own professional development, professional learning. I think those are areas that he identified pretty quickly that districts would all probably acknowledge that's an area to grow and do better. Angela, I don't know if there's other thoughts that you have in terms of kind of the sense of baseline data from Eklund related to other districts.
I don't have anything to add.
Sure.
There's no microphone over there, and I just used Kathy's real quick.
That's what Ian was really hard to hear.
I don't really have anything to add to what you said about baseline compared to other districts, but just important to note that when looking at our growth, this is great baseline for us moving forward, since we do continue to, we are planning to use it year after year. So this will help us as our baseline and where we're going to grow from there, and working with the schools on how we grow individually as well.
Martha, when it comes to the general workload issues, can anyone give any more background for that?
I can try. I can't give you exacts right now on the general workload issue. I think the pandemic has really just, we talked when I did the data report in November about how our students are in a difficult place right now. Our staff members are also. And I think the pandemic has just really put a lot of pressure on them. And we've just recently talked about this with the leadership team and with the union leadership. We have high performing staff members who put high expectations on themselves. And so they're struggling with trying to help our students be what we used to know students to be, and struggling with trying to help our students catch up faster than is really possible. And I think that in that sense, they're putting some extra pressure on themselves. We have heard some conversations about the various committees, whether through strategic plan, through full day kindergarten as part of strategic plan, math curricular review, just the different things that are happening along, like the normal things that happen when doing school, that has been a little bit more for them as well. So they want to be involved, they want to help make decisions, but it feels to them like it's piling on. So we are working with Todd Battaglia and Nate Eklund on working with our staff members on helping to problem solve, working together to problem solve. So we've talked as a leadership team about how, just like I just did, we can give our ideas on what each thing means, but if we really don't have the conversations and discussions with them, we won't have the true meaning behind what they're saying and possible solutions. So that's really been the conversations that Martha and I have been having with the leadership team and with the union leadership, that we need to work together to come up with solutions, because we can guess what the solutions might be, but it may not meet their needs. So that's part of, to your workload question, we're still working on that with them, working on exactly what it means and then how to address it.
Yeah, I was wondering, I know you have a professional development committee with teachers on it. Do you anticipate those items being part of the future professional development pieces? Like the problem solving and things like that? Or is it yet to be determined in the committee?
So right now, it's partly yet to be determined, and we're working on as a professional. We continuously look at survey results from professional learning sessions after each session to see what's working, what's not working, and to try to revamp it. And each time we make adjustments and changes and continue that process. One of the things that we've been working on is trying to personalize professional learning, and that's been a mindset shift for a number of staff members. Professional learning has usually looked like go to a room, be told information, walk away, hopefully with information to use in your classroom the next day. Sometimes you walk away thinking that was a waste of my 30 minutes. And what we're trying to do as a professional learning team is shift that and help the staff members become agents of their own learning, much like we want to work on doing for them, with them for their students. And so to your question about, is that something we could do for professional learning? That's a goal that they could set through our professional learning process that we have right now on how to work on workload, work-life balance, and then gathering the resources, working with their small groups on how they're meeting their, what we call minimum next steps, how they're meeting those minimum next steps towards the bigger goal.
Yeah, I think Angela just said it all very well. I think the work with Nate Eklund and Todd Battaglia through the Swiss is very focused on building leadership teams, really having a lot of ownership around their own school culture and climate and making important decisions. Of course, all interconnected, and our leadership team pulls those big ideas together. I also think Todd is really helpful, even helping all of us kind of reframe this idea of, I know it's on the news, it's everywhere. It's this idea of learning loss, unfinished learning, the suffering that happened during the pandemic. The pandemic's not over either, but really just identifying, as Angela said, we need to meet children where they are and help them grow. They have a lot of social emotional needs. Not every child, right? I mean, some children sort of thrive during the pandemic, thrive during periods of remote learning. So I want to be careful not to make it feel like it's all children, but we definitely see, and you saw it in the student learning data, but I think exactly what Angela said, teachers are putting very high expectations on themselves to get kids sort of back to where they used to be. And that's not going to happen overnight, but we greatly appreciate that in our staff. It's what makes them high quality, highly dedicated teachers, but they're putting a pressure on themselves too that we're trying to help them with. We're not saying we don't, we're talking about this is a period of time that is just different than I think anybody has ever encountered before. So we want our kids to get through this and keep getting better and better, and we want our staff to stay wanting to be teachers, right? So we hear that on the national scene, that teaching is a career right now that people are questioning, and it's been because of the pandemic. And I feel fortunate that we're not hearing that overtly here. We're not dealing with a staff shortage here, but we know we're dealing with people that are, troubled by where things are right now.
Yeah, thank you, that's helpful. It was hard just from a couple sentences to figure out what exactly they were talking about. Thank you.
Some of that's kind of some of this is kind of our own editorial anecdote.
Yeah, and it's a survey, so it's hard to sometimes get what everybody's talking about, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Angela.
Yes.
All right. Anything else for the Personnel Committee? Okay. Let's see, then next is the Education Committee.
Yeah, I mean, does Angela want to come back up? We
Angela,
met.
come on down.
What was it, yesterday? Time is blurring. We met this week.
This week.
We met this week, Monday, maybe?
Yes, I think it was Monday.
We met Monday, and the first thing we talked about was the e-learning plan, so I'll let Angela go ahead and make more comments about that.
So as you
Remind
probably,
us too, maybe remind us, because we had that e-learning talk like a year ago, so maybe fill us in on how,
yes. So as you probably saw in the memo, in November of 2019, we approved an e-learning plan that would allow us to use 3 of our emergency days, or use 3 e-learning days in place of 3 of our emergency days. And so when we first approved the plan in November of 2019, it was for us to send packets home prior to any use of a snow day, emergency day. And then students would work on those packets, email teachers if they had questions. A few months after that approval, we learned that we can do more than packets. So through the emergency learning system and through hybrid learning last year, we now have the capacity to do more than packets. And so we have adjusted our e-learning plan so that it reflects what we are capable of doing so that we can provide high quality instruction on these e-learning days. E-learning plans are approved by boards for 3-year periods. So that's why we just updated it and doesn't have to come to you for an approval. You approve the use of the e-learning plan, and if we make adjustments, we can make those within the 3 years. So we've adjusted it so that elementary students will receive 3 hours and 10 minutes of synchronous instruction, and what that is equated to is their, for 1st through 5th grade, their arrival time at 8:15 in the morning till what is their lunchtime at 11:25. Then they would have lunch from 11:25 till 12:15. And then at 12:15, their teachers would be available for any assistance with asynchronous work that they're working on. And they can reach out to their teachers through email, Schoology for 3rd through 5th grade, and Seesaw for kindergarten through 2nd grade. Special area classes will be held in the morning. And for afternoon, kids who had specials in the afternoon would receive synchronous lessons that they could do in the afternoon for those specials. Any students who receive specialized instruction like English language learners, special education, reading and math interventions, those teachers would reach out for scheduling for those services on the e-learning days. Kindergarten would follow their half-day schedule, 8:15 till the time that they normally depart. I think it's 2.5 hours of instruction then for kindergarten in the morning, and then 12:15 for the afternoon class. And then our early learners would have live stream instruction for morning circle and read aloud, and then they would have asynchronous activities that they were able to do because being younger, they don't really need to be on screen for 2.5 hours, and it's just it's not developmentally appropriate for them. At the junior high level, we wanted to make sure students were able to experience all of their classes. So if we had only done a 2.5 hour day or a 3 hour day, they wouldn't have been able to experience their full class load. And we didn't want to say one subject or one class, core is more important than encore, or some other class is more important than another class. So we wanted to make sure they were able to synchronously experience all their classes. So the junior high goes from 8:30 to 12:30 and runs their regular schedule at 25-minute blocks. Math and ELA will still be a double block, so it'll be a 50-minute class. And then they have lunch for an hour, and after that hour, their teachers are available till 2:30, for office hours through Schoology as well.
It's quite an improvement in a plan in 3 years, but I guess we have COVID to thank for that.
Yeah, we're only gonna use it for a couple of days.
I know.
One of our administrators came to me in February of 2020 and he said, I think we've made it. I don't think we're gonna have to use our e-learning days.
And then March.
But and just to be clear, the way the plan is configured right now, it is essentially for those emergency days.
Yeah.
Correct.
Mhm.
And I had an opportunity to meet with the superintendents from Comark and Brookfield 95 and the high school today, at Riverside Brookfield High School. And we will continue to confer and make snow day, emergency day decisions together. But I think all 4 districts will likely, I know 3 for sure, will rely on an e-learning plan instead of a day off that needs to be made up at the end of the school year.
Describe again how the ones, if they're the younger ones, how you'll communicate when they take those devices home? Is it just gonna be whether seasonal based or how will that work?
So our younger kids do not take their devices home every night. And actually for our kindergarten through 1st, even 2nd grade, it's rarely taken home. What we do know about major snowstorms is that you're usually predicted in advance. And so we'll be working with the teachers in the upcoming week so that they know if it looks like it's going to be a storm, you're going to want to tell your kids, make sure you take your device home, your charger home, just in case we do have an e-learning day. So they'll plan ahead for that. We're also going to spend the next week with students showing them how they can access the link, whether on Seesaw or Schoology, for their teachers' Zoom classes. We'll have Hauser see the schedule, the 25-minute schedule, so they know when they're logging in, they're supposed to log in. That will also be posted on the Hauser website as well so that parents can see it should we have an e-learning day. So we'll work with students then on what the expectations are for e-learning, and teachers will be able to give a heads up hopefully prior to a major snowstorm or such.
Yeah, I was wondering, because we have a 2-week break, do you anticipate sending them home for the break, just because, who knows? I guess that can be determined by the teacher.
And we have seen years where there's been something major happening right at the end of break, so yes, that is something that we were discussing.
I guess we'll take it as it comes, but.
So I was looking at this, and I appreciate it, because I actually had a question how what training you're going to give to the kids, because I haven't heard about that. But I guess one thing especially for the younger kids, would you be sending home like some packets or something, at least for basic log-on information for the parents? I know that for some parents, that can be challenging.
I am sure our primary teachers would be on top of that and know that that's information that needs to be communicated, but I'll work with the principals so that when we're talking with the teachers on Monday, that they do point that out, that would be a good thing to do as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was a difficult year, but I remember actually getting login sent to the parents' emails rather than the child's device, so you'd have to give them your device. And the parent would be without a device because they had to log in a different way, because it was just a difficult time. But yeah, I'm hoping that's all streamlined a lot better.
Yeah.
That is my hope too,
Yeah.
so if it's not happening, please let me know.
Yeah, I will. No, it was transitional, but I do remember like some days just one of us wouldn't have a device, and you just had to go with it. So, and I kept thinking, what if someone doesn't have an extra,
Exactly.
to give them? So.
The techie side, it's been a caution against sending login information through email.
Yeah, I know.
Um,
I know.
so-
Well, we also talked about posting everything on our website, and of course, on a terrible weather day, our website could be down.
Could be down. Well, we'll just day by day, I guess. We'll see.
We also, did you say, and I think just in the original plan, we approved 3 days for e-learning. We could approve up to 5. If you recall, back in November of 2019, we weren't sure if this whole virtual thing would work or not. So we are still at 3. We're not asking for a change in that because we're really not changing the resolution that was approved back in November of 2019. But if we were to have more than 3 emergency days, we could end up with sort of the true traditional day off that has to be picked up later.
I do remember Jeff at the meeting where we approved this, lamenting the loss of the snow day.
Play in the snow. Yeah, there is a lot of good to be said for that. Let them come back and tell you about everything that they did outside. And sometimes that's beautiful too. So.
We don't disagree. One of the things our leadership was talking about is that often our severe weather days have been those bitter cold days, those 35 below.
That's the sad part when
Yeah.
they can't go out.
The beautiful snowy days, the kids are probably coming to school with their snow pants. So we'll have them play in the snow at recess.
Okay.
I hope so. Yeah. Okay.
All right, moving on to the next one.
Technology, it says K through 2 have iPads and 5 through 8 have Chromebooks that will come home, but it doesn't mention anything about grades 3 and 4. So I don't know if that's technically relevant to the document, but.
It is relevant to the document. Thanks, Wesley. We did notice that at our leadership meeting this morning, so I have adjusted it on the document that will go online as well, but we had just noticed it today. So it should read K through 2 for iPads and 3 through 8 for Chromebooks.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on, anything else? No? I cannot hear him, so I didn't know he was talking, sorry.
I was thinking someone clicked a link or something. But
Yeah.
The next item is the community survey for kindergarten that we had talked about at the last meeting. I know we talked about it at length and we got some feedback, so we have an edited draft here. And Sherry and I met with Angela and Martha about this, and we kind of came to the conclusion that what we're trying to do here is a pulse check on the community. We very much hear the question about childcare that was raised. So we did add one question at the end, you'll notice, that is in the same line with the Likert scale, stating for them to rate. There are several benefits to a full-day kindergarten program, including childcare assistance. So that question was added, and the other thing that we added is just an open-ended question at the end, which I think is probably one of the more valuable parts of this, because what we're wanting to get is community feedback. So Sherry and I know this isn't perfect. I don't think there is such thing as perfect in this.
No.
I think it's just one little piece of the puzzle, a little bit of information for the board as we collectively get information to make decisions later on. So this is what we're presenting to you now. We would suggest and recommend that we go ahead and start sending this out. But if there was any other feedback.
I think I personally, and I wasn't at your in-person discussion last time, but I did do my best to listen. It was long, but I did hear your comments, and I think what's important to note is we're not asking these parents, they haven't read the research that's going on in the committee level. I think we're just asking them about their lives and what's important to them and what they believe to be true. And it might change next week, but this is one piece. I think we have many pieces to look at from the committee and from the financials aspect. But so that's my take, is that this is just one piece, and a perfect survey does not exist, but this is, I think, what they came up with. So.
No, I mean, I appreciate this. I mean, I know we talked about, I don't necessarily think that the survey needs to be this long, because I think a lot of these questions are subjective, and asking for opinions on information that probably most people don't have. I guess one question I do have, and one concern I do have, is it just sort of to that point, is that there's a question towards the end that says the average cost to provide, the average costs are reasonable for the benefits associated to the implementation of full-day kindergarten. I mean, unless they've attended today's meeting, they don't know what the costs are. And so, I just, well, I appreciate what you're saying. There's like, it's difficult to make a perfect survey. I still think it should just be shorter, more to the point of saying, and I know we don't want to make it a referendum, which still don't feel it would be a referendum, but just, is this important to the district? Would your family benefit from it? So I just wanted to that's where sort of my thoughts on this are. I just think there's just a lot of questions that, like I said, my opinion is I'm going to go with the educational committee. I mean, the kindergarten committee over community input. So.
Can you remind me, and Dave's points are good. Can you remind me, Sherry and Linda, there's the questions here that talk about whether or not full day leads to greater academic success or half day. What kind of resources or links? Are we providing anything? Are we providing any reference material at all?
No, because
for
this
parents?
isn't supposed to be do research and then tell us your answer. I think this is really just a gut check. If people don't have an opinion on that, they don't have to answer that one.
Well, and that would be my concern, is the question asks if an option provides greater success, or asks a parent to assess essentially whether or not the program would lead to greater academic success. And if it's just feel good, I'm not sure it does become a referendum, because yeah.
I think David, I was thinking about listening to David, he did make one good point, that maybe instead of saying the cost is worth it, maybe just rephrase it to say the cost is a factor in my consideration for this, or the district should consider the cost, or because they really don't, he's right, they don't have the numbers. So yeah, it's nuances, but.
I just think people who want it are gonna be like, the district should pay for it, whatever
Yeah, I
it costs.
know.
Right,
Like,
and they'll go through
whether
this
it's
and say, oh, yeah.
400,000, a million, like, they don't know. It's
They
like, they're just
either
gonna be
want it
like,
or
yep,
don't.
you guys should be doing this, the cost should be what the cost is, and
Yeah.
it should be covered if other districts, that's the way I'm foreseeing it. And similarly, just in talking to people about it, they're like, oh, I feel like our children would benefit academically. Where they've reached that
I don't
conclusion,
know.
whether they read the 40-page journal article, or it's just something that they assume to be the case with longer instruction. But I think people will answer the survey, you know, in that way. So I'm not too concerned with the way it's written, and I appreciate you all listening and adding in that question that also gauges other benefits and also takes into account an issue that we have heard a lot about in conjunction with the conversation about full-day kindergarten, which is childcare assistance. So.
I also think, I like the addition of the open-ended question, because it really, you know, it's not like we're gonna go through and aggregate that and do any analysis, but as a board member, that part I think is gonna be very informative, because they're gonna be able to say whatever they want to say, you know, in whatever way they want to say there. So for me, that is a really good piece to me. And in the end, we wanna just make sure people have the opportunity, one, to know this is even going on at the table, because many people probably don't even know this conversation is happening. So by getting this communication, it's alerting them to that, hopefully having them tune into the conversation a little bit more if it's something they really care about, and to give us, you know, just a pulse check on where where people are and any comments. So I personally think there's no perfect way to do this. I think this is an okay way to do it, and I just don't know, like, how much more time we should, you know what I mean?
I think
Well,
that-
I agree. I'm glad you put the open-ended question at the end. I definitely agree with Stephanie's points as well. I think, you know, especially given the number of questions that we have here, it's going to make people self-select even more, that if they're in favor of it, they're going to be strongly in favor of it. I think I've been told that this survey, the results of the survey are essentially for the board, not for the administration. I guess we'll see what the results turn out to be. I personally, though, there will be several grains of salt on my bedside as I'm reading the results.
I just thought of something that, have we considered, besides strongly agree all the way to strongly disagree, just putting a column that says not sure because they don't, or not enough information? If they don't want to answer that, do they have to really say
Okay.
they strongly disagree? Because someone might say, I have no idea what this costs. I don't know, and maybe that's useful information. I
Not
don't
sure.
know
I think, yeah,
who set up
actually,
the scale,
that
but I was
could
just
make a
thinking
lot of
that's an
sense.
easy fix for those people that don't know the answer. Like, why are we asking them to strongly disagree?
Actually, I would.
But I'm not a survey writer, I don't know.
Well, actually, we just went through an employee engagement survey through work, and sort of that middle ground is considered a negative. So if people say they don't know, or it's considered a negative. So
Yeah.
I would say pick a side.
Yeah, a lot of times in survey design, they don't want to give you that middle option because people veer towards it, and so it does kind of muddy things up. But by having a thing this isn't applicable to me, or I don't know,
Right,
I mean, 'cause
that's
the
different
only
than.
choices are you agree or disagree, but if the question is the finances are worth it, then if you have no idea what that costs, how in the
Yeah.
world could you answer that?
Or then
Other
we just
than,
put
like
NA
Stephanie's
or
saying, it's worth
something.
$1 million, I'm okay with it.
Well, to Joel's point, could we, was that part of the agenda on the public, the graph that was created by Jim on the costs?
So like the information from tonight is publicly available.
So,
but it's-
I mean,
Yeah.
Could we link it?
hyperlink to that, but like to your point then, would you feel like then we would need to hyperlink everything that we're asking them to decide on, like data on the academics? Or would it be sufficient in case somebody is interested, and I wonder what they are projecting these costs to be, because some people do follow the board's financial decisions closely and have an opinion on how much is in reserves and how much is being spent on improvements. So it might be a point of interest that they could easily access if you do link out to the projected costs. But I don't know if that then opens the door to needing to link out to every other question in regards to academics, et cetera.
In my mind, I would say it's okay to have a single link that leads you to a spot that has the additional resources. You don't have to provide a link for each question.
Oh, one bit, okay.
I don't think it hurts. I mean, there are
I
people
mean,
that,
you
they won't,
could- I
everybody
think
won't read
makes
it, but there'll be some.
Easier for our setup, and to Linda's point, honestly, the paragraph question, the open-ended question is probably the most interesting one. And I will not have my druthers, but if I had my druthers, I would require people to answer that and put down some kind of paragraph level answer to.
You must write
Paragraph. You need 500 words.
No, that's too much, but
No.
a sentence or two that, you know, is well thought out,
Yeah.
because that's more valuable and more interesting in terms of understanding where people are coming from.
Yeah.
And the I don't know question is also, I think, valid, because it just allows you to not answer it, but it gives you a reason you're not answering it. And Sherry,
Yeah,
I'm
we could
sorry,
say,
I
if you're
interrupted you.
required to write in this section, we could, I don't know how often that's
Per
done.
board
but-
member Joel Marhol.
Yeah, and his email is.
So I would actually suggest that we take that question about the average cost out, because the question before it says that this should be a funding priority for the district. So we already talked about money in that question
Yeah.
prior. So I would
Mhm.
suggest instead of linking it, we just take it out.
Nope, I agree,
I'm
yeah.
all for that.
I
That's
agree.
good.
A more in-depth conversation will be coming up, I'm sure, about the finances that the public will be attuned to. So at this
Yeah.
stage, given the purpose of the survey, I agree. Good catch.
Yeah, it's just hard to know, like, when do you ask them about the academic benefits? Do they expect them to be educational experts?
And do they care if we do our facilities projects? Feel like
Absolutely,
there's so much context to that.
it's a domino, so.
So I'll remove that, and then I will add a fifth column that says either I don't know or no opinion or something of that sort, whatever our function
Yeah,
or
not just a
capabilities it's
neutral,
in.
like,
I'd
not
probably
one
say
in the
no.
middle, but one on the end.
No,
Exactly.
I'm not
Sorry.
on the end, that if they really didn't have the information, they.
Right.
Right.
the answer.
So not like a not sure, but a
I still
cannot
think
answer.
linking a couple links to some of those finances, though, I think is being as transparent as possible, I think is important, and why not give people what they might need?
No, I mean, I can appreciate that, but at the same token, if we're gonna put one, I disagree
Well,
with you.
put the
totally.
research articles too, I mean, the committee is reading them, there'll be a small fraction that read it, but I don't know, I don't think
think
any
you can also-
information
We
is
could
harmful.
put that on if we wanted to, you know, like when we were doing strategic planning, that was one of our goals. We put everything up there, all the articles. I don't know if anybody ever went and read any of them, but we agreed we would put all our resources. And so on that, now I guess I'm looking at you two under our strategic planning, where we kind of say work in progress. We have a whole page. We can go to the full day kindergarten, we can put those articles, we can put the agendas of our meetings, we can put this financial overview there. I mean, it's on our website, but you have to kind of
And
navigate to the board book,
Yeah.
and, you know, there's some challenges in that, so
Martha,
maybe that's the answer.
that's really where I was leaning, is we have this information that we've assembled, we've spent a lot of time and effort, and so it should be shared. It doesn't have to be, you know, if sharing is in the way you're suggesting, I think is appropriate.
If we're not recreating anything, we're just
Correct.
sort of organizing where those documents.
No, you already have it, just put it in one place for them. We did it before, I think that's fine.
No, I think that's helpful, that conversation helps, thanks.
I think that's all we had on that agenda. Oh, no, sorry, there's one more. The community partnership, there's one more.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just have the one other, as you know, we've been.
Wait, was Wesley trying to say something?
Oh, I
at
can't
some
hear
point?
him,
Sorry,
sorry.
Wes, go ahead.
I didn't know he was talking.
If we're gonna distribute this in a non-digital medium, I really doesn't work. So, like, want to think about how you're gonna direct people to that platform if they can't physically, like, click the link and immediately take it there.
Would we do it non-digitally? Is that?
I don't know, there was, in our prior discussion, we talked about potentially like posting a flyer or like distributing pieces of paper, like distributing these as physical pieces of paper. So if we're not gonna do that, it's irrelevant, but if we are gonna do that, then the links won't work. So I don't know if we need like a full, you know, HTTP, whatever, so that people can type it in other than to just click it, but I guess it just depends on how we're planning on distributing this to the broader community.
I think in the intro, we can put that materials, research materials, and financial materials, agendas can all be found at, and then put the website for the strategic plan in that intro.
Website or QR code, perhaps, or?
Mhm.
Well, paper would be a bear to manage, though. I'm all for digital personally.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yep, thank you.
Thanks.
And then I think the last item under education was just focus on strategic plan goal 4. I think there's an update about the family and community partnerships that Martha.
Right, so, our agreement has been to try to take all 5 of the goals and rotate, so actually tonight, I think it's been hopefully clear enough, we're working on talking about goal 4 and goal 5 and updating you in the other areas that we want to update you. So Jim providing the financial overview of full-day kindergarten costs relates to the goal 5, stewardship of our resources. And then the other one is goal 4, family and community partnerships. And I know I've shared with you, I'm what we call the goal champion for that area. My partner with that is Sarah Hickey, one of our instructional coaches, our only instructional coach. But it's great having a teacher partner in the process. So just wanted to share with you that we had our first meeting in late October. We have 4 parents now that'll be on our committee along with a group of teachers. So it's, I think, our only strategic plan committee right now where we have parent participation. It's great to have parent voice. What's interesting and probably not surprising about this one is really there's multiple lenses in the way people see family and community partnership. And families, I think, parents spoke a lot to the kind of events and activities that the school offers. Teachers are really talking about those student learning opportunities, things like a family math night, family reading night, recalling other different activities that have been done that really very specifically relate to student learning areas. Also this idea of looking at our field trips and community-based activities where kids could maybe do more project-based or problem-based learning within the community. And from my lens, I'm looking at also a lot around communication and how to build more two-way communication, but also ensuring that our one-way communication is clear. I mean, the e-learning conversation was a good piece of that, as well as the kindergarten survey. So our second meeting for this committee will be next Thursday, and we're going to look, as you can see from the agenda, just our first meeting was kind of focused on why is family and community partnership important, and now looking at a sense of what is it that we're already doing, what feel like our priorities, what are areas that we would want to grow and change and add. So more to follow on this one. This one, again, probably doesn't have our greatest urgency. This is an area that really appreciate the feedback as truly in that vein of continuous improvement and how can we get better at this. So more to follow with that. Any questions? That's our last under education.
I think it is great, though, that you're bringing in parents to be a part of that committee as well. I know we've had trouble reaching out to the larger community, folks that don't have kids in school. I didn't know if there was any effort directed there or...
Not right now. I mean, the 4 parents are all parents of children in District 96 by design. My wheels are turning about the full-day kindergarten survey, and I imagine a stack of papers at Riverside Foods and at Village Hall. I think, it's very hard to reach the non-parent community members. We did a little bit during strategic planning. We worked hard at that, and I think we had 2 community members that were not parents that responded to our surveys. So.
Could we possibly use it's not hard copy, but social media, something that's posted on the district's social media that's then forwarded to like the Riverside Communities page, just saying, there's this survey out, go ahead, I don't know if that's what our practice with social media is.
I think each of the villages obviously has their own community.
Yeah, the village
pages,
has
and
one.
I know they're fairly well used, and not by everybody obviously, but it's a good idea.
Riverside, but also Brookfield would be applicable.
Yeah,
And
no, that's
Riverside,
all
yeah.
the village,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
thank you, yes.
And North Riverside, for that matter.
Yeah.
All right. Busy committee presentations tonight. All right. Next then is the policy committee.
Yep. So really the only update that I have for tonight is just, I sound like a broken record at this point, the Press 108 issue that was recently released, which I believe we're planning to bring at the February CAL. Is that right, Martha? I don't know what that agenda is starting to look like for the February CAL, because it's not due until March. And Kathy and I are actually attending the Press 108 update webinar next week on Tuesday, where they talk just generally about the updates, and then there's a second part to the session specific, I believe it's specific to your school or your district as well. So that's coming up, and as well as There's another Ed Red meeting this Friday. I'm not sure if I'm able to attend that one. The agenda looked, literally one of the topics was hot legislation, and a guest speaker, a legislator, like a representative from the House. I don't know if it's going to be a surprise or what, and then the Cook County assessor. So I'm not sure if I'll join this Friday's Ed Red meeting. I have to look at my schedule. But they always send the minutes out after. If there's anything on there that I think is pertinent to report out, I will. That's kind of what we're doing policy. I don't know, Martha, was there anything else?
No, that's it.
Questions? Thoughts?
All right, we definitely look forward to the presentation in February.
I'm sure. I'm sure. That's what everyone's looking forward to.
As you know, past policy committee chair, you know, definitely it's good to bring like a disco ball or a laser light show to make it a little bit more exciting.
Noted.
All right. Let's see. So that brings us back again to public comment. And I think I
did
see.
receive one and I did forward it to you.
I saw that. I will read that now.
Okay.
Let's see, for District 96 public comment. Subject, congratulations on completing Hollywood Multipurpose Room, Playground, and Parking Lot. Want to thank the entire school board and Superintendent Martha Ryan Toy on completion of project at Hollywood School before snow arrives and students got a chance to enjoy it this year. This is from a Hollywood School graduate, a former employee of District 96, and a member of the Hollywood Community House Association. Thanks again for providing a safer place for the students. Glenn Klecka, a 67-year-old resident of Hollywood. All right. Folks remember Mr. Klecka. He used to come to the meetings often, so it's good to hear from Mr. Klecka. Glad that he's doing well.
The pictures of the kids on the playground was so exciting.
Yes,
It
very
felt,
much so.
those were good pictures to see.
I was happy for that, but honestly, I was excited to see the multipurpose room, almost more just thinking about them eating and doing classes and stuff. Because the weather's changing, I was so excited to see that it's going to be used. So.
Very much, yes. All right. So any additional public comment? Okay, then that brings us to future meeting dates. December 15th, 2021 is a regular business meeting at 7 p.m. in the multipurpose room at Ames Elementary School. The board will enter into closed session at 6:15 p.m. if necessary and return to open session at 7 p.m. The January 5th Committee of the Whole meeting has been canceled, which brings us to the January 19th regular business meeting at 7 p.m. in the multipurpose room at Ames Elementary School. The board will enter into closed session at 6:15 p.m. if necessary and return to open session at 7 p.m. All right, and if there is nothing else, this meeting is adjourned.